When you were previewing the content, you probably noticed that you saw a little yellow error page, and I'll show you what that looks like. In 8.5 and 10.5, they've added a kind of a little warning bar here that tells you what's wrong with the content, if there's anything wrong, like translations are um, targeting issues. So in this case, when you click on that, you can see that it doesn't know what to do. It sees the content, but it doesn't know what language the content is in. Now you could create a translation, but that's kind of silly because then you'd have two versions of the same content. So there's a few ways to fix this. You can go to the folder where your content is stored. You could set the language, and that would work to English, but you still have a problem because every time you create content, someone has to go set the language. So what we prefer to do is set the language at the site level, and then whenever content gets created, it automatically goes to English or French or whatever. So one of the things you want to check is the site configuration. So I'll go to Site, I'll go to Site button, it's a little slow. I'll go to Properties, and I'll look at my languages and make sure I have a language that's set as default. And I do. So that works. So why isn't the content being created in English? And if you look at your content type, you can kind of see why. You look at the new item you created, the new type, and if you look at the attributes, you'll notice that it doesn't have any of the virtual attributes that are supported in 8.5. So, for example, localization attributes, furl attributes, targeting attributes. You can see you've got all your attributes, but you're missing your language attribute. And that's what's used to determine whether content is English or French or whatever. So to make this work, the best way is to add a virtual attribute to your type. So I'll select the language attribute, and while I'm here, I might as well add the URL, the furl, because we do want furls. We don't want ugly GUIDs in the URL. So I'm going to give the content instances based on this type a furl. And maybe I could target this content as well and put targeting rules if you want, or not. It depends on where you are with the training, but you could go ahead and add that if you want. But I'm just going to add language and URL. And with language, you have to put this in a special place. So I have to select the language attribute, and I've got to move it up just above, or excuse me, just below the GUID. Otherwise, it doesn't work. The furl can stay where it is, or you can put it in a separate tab if you want to, using groups. So if you go to your group split, you could organize your types into groups, but you have to make sure you're careful with the um, the group name. But that should be fine. So we've got language, we've got URL. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I'll approve my content type. Very important to approve, otherwise we can't create content. And then I'm going to do a full sync. And the reason is we've got content instances based on this type already, so I do need to go synchronize those instances. So I'll choose to do a full sync and maybe even reset approval and workflow status, but that's no big deal. On my sync options, if I know that there's a lot of content out there, I'll tune that and do that in chunks. So maybe I'll lower the number of content items per chunk. And you can use force synchronization when pending change is false. Not recommended in this case. So but I'm going to do a full sync. So I've synchronized all my content instances. Now if I go refresh my folders, we should be able to see languages now. So I'll go to products. I'll turn on translations to see if it's picking up the translation now. And not quite yet. That's because we have existing instances. It doesn't know what languages it is yet. Now once we create new content from this point on, it will. So for example, just to make sure that that's the case, I'll create a new content item. And you'll notice you have the language attribute now. So that's nice, and it's set to English. So it should work, right? I click Save and Close. And now I can see the little flag that shows me it's English. I can turn translations off or on. For those that don't have languages yet, I can select those and then set the language manually, or I can go into the item and set the language. So I can double click those items and set the language appropriately. But once the language is set, now the code knows what to do. The system knows what to do, or it should know what to do. So if we go into our preview, we shouldn't see that error anymore. I'll do a refresh. Cool. All right, so we don't see the error anymore. That's a good sign. So as you can see, there's no error, but the content still isn't showing up. And if we go back to the display view, we see XML like before. So we need to look at the code to see what's causing the problem now. So a few steps here. One of the things we want to look at is the all the filtering that's going on in that code. The really important thing here is the content item tag in the templating library. That's important when we're using a content item component. If this were a regular component like a smart list, we would use a different tag there. Requested channel bean is there, localized references is there, but you've got a lot of filtering, and you know that's nice if we know it works. So before you put filters in of any sort, you should make sure that you can actually render the content. So best practice is to remove all the filters and remove all the styles. You've got styles in here that are may or may not be available in your page layout or in your template. So for example, you've got Innovate DV Product Full View, and that might not be available, we don't know. So best thing is just to clean all this up, remove all the filters, and see if you can render just basic content. So the steps to do that are just get rid of all this logical stuff here. So there's this when, and I've made a backup of this before I've started, which is the one I'm editing. I'll go to the one I was editing. So I'm just removing all of these, all of this business logic, right? And I'm setting my variables, title, teaser. I don't think you have the teaser attribute. You can check really quick. If I look at my type, let's see if we have those attributes. Yeah, you do. Title, teaser, body, price. Perfect. So you've got title, teaser. There's a var, has accessories, has recommendations. We're not using that. That's used in the business logic. So that's set. We don't really care about that. We'll also maybe get rid of these div classes or use classes that we know exist. But here's something that we should also take a look at. These divs reference an include file, and then include file is referencing things that don't exist in our context. And that's definitely not going to work. You'll get blank when it tries to find these things. For example, this attribute doesn't exist, perhaps. Component title. Oh, that should be there. That should be there. These div classes don't exist, so that might be a problem. Usually divs that don't exist, it just goes to a default, but it's still kind of a problem. So we should just clean all this up. So I've spent just a minute or two cleaning up some things there. I removed anything we don't care about right now. And I'm just putting title and teaser. And the reason this is nice and the reason this is best practice is because all the business logic that is really very cool later is added after we've only validated that the content can be seen. So now that I've removed all that business logic and those filters, and I've removed, you notice all the classes that may or may not work in our environment. I've saved this, and I'm going to go back to preview and refresh my screen, and I should be able to see content now. And I do see my title and my teaser, so that's a good sign. So we've gotten through that step, and now we go back into the code and maybe make it more useful by adding that kind of business logic. In particular, there was some business logic to make sure that there was content there, and if there isn't content, to go place some sample content, for example. Here, I can put this back. There we go. But this code, we've got to go make sure this code exists in our context, and if it doesn't, we need to create it. We also need to look at that code to make sure there's nothing in there that would create a problem for us. Because what that code is doing is it's hard coding a content instance that's in another site, the Innovate site, and that's not available in our context. So that's not going to work until we make some changes to this code. So for the moment, you're fine. And if you want to, you can add some additional business logic there, but this is cool. Another thing that you might want to look at too is taking a further look at localization. So now that you've turned on languages, you can now go into your workspace and you can create languages. You can turn off languages and turn them on. You can set translation groups and create translations. So that's probably the next step to look at as well.